Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today. All right, welcome back to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis, and we have a special guest today, Kimberly Clark.
Hey.
Glad to have you on, Kimberly.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. I had seen that we go to the same jiu-jitsu gym and, have a couple of different friends. And so I'd seen that you had put out a book about addiction and mental health and recovery. And so I was just like, oh man, that'd be a great person to, one, hopefully get that good information out to people on our platform. Right. And then vice versa, kind of share. And that's one of the things we want to do with the podcast and with our practice is just get involved in people in the community who have stories to tell and who have things that they can say that the Lord's doing. That's awesome. So it's a mutually beneficial conversation. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about you. Introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us the name of your book and just, general information, and then we'll kind of get into the questions.
Okay. Well, my name is Kimberly Clark. I am a Navy veteran, published author, inspirational speaker. The title of my book is Stuck Between Pleasure and Pleasing God. It's a memoir about my life, getting in the Navy, getting a medical discharge, being diagnosed with PTSD, going through addiction, alcoholism, emotional abuse, physical abuse, narcissistic abuse, and how I overcame it, how I healed from it, what it took to overcome it and heal from it, and my journey on learning to love myself, right? And trying to advocate for other people who's going through some of the same things. Yeah. So
that's good stuff. It's very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So where are you from originally?
I'm from Castor, Louisiana.
Castor.
Man, nobody's ever heard of Castor.
I never Castor. I'm from DeVille, Louisiana, which nobody's ever heard of either.
Right? We got a population of about 600 people. Okay. I may be under exaggerating, but yeah.
One stop sign.
One stop sign, yeah. One little flashing light. It's not even a real light.
Oh man, that's fancy. Yeah, the flashes are blinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about kind of, I don't want to, spoil the book too much, but obviously we talked about, telling your story. So as much as you want to give on that, kind of walk us through kind of what led you to writing and all that stuff.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, God gave me the vision for my book as a teenager, right? So I knew that I was going to write my story. So at the time that he gave me the vision, I had already been through low self-esteem, bullying, I wouldn't call it molestation, but maybe sexual assault as a child. Mm-hmm. So, kind of being touched by family members and stuff like that. So I'd already been through that, but I didn't know the extent of the content that, that the book would have. But yeah, so
you just felt this passion to tell a story and share your story. And
right. Yeah. I've always had a passion for people, to want to know more about people, to help them wherever they're at. I've always had a passion for that. I always loved talking to people. I wanted originally to after high school, go to ULM, University of Louisiana Monroe, to become a psychologist, minor in social work. And of course, I talked to that line recruiter, and the recruiter told me that I could, travel the world, go to college at the same time. So I'm like, hey, cool. And so my mom signed for me, and I was off to the races, went to basic training in Chicago.
What year was that?
2007.
Okay.
2007, right? And so I looked out like the last day of basic training, finally got my orders, and I was going to Guam. Man, a small town country girl like me going to Guam, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I got to Guam. Guam was beautiful. It was first time I seen my ship, the USS Frank Cable, which is a submarine tender. It was like majestic, almost majestic to me, right? And I loved my job. I loved everything about it. And
what did you do?
I was an operations specialist.
Okay. So what's that mean?
I basically, like, I worked with, like, radar, stuff like that.
On the sub?
Yeah. No. On the ship.
Okay.
On the ship. I worked on the bridge.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked on the bridge. I actually drove the ship. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Well, a lot of people don't believe that. I really did, yeah.
That's awesome.
The ham, lee ham and stuff, we learned all that.
Yeah.
So that was pretty awesome. Yeah, and what got me out of the Navy, I'd actually wanted to do 20 years. That was my original goal, right? But I ended up enduring a MST, a military sexual trauma. And I tried to commit suicide after that. And I remember being medevaced back to the States, back to San Diego. And, like, the whole time they was going to, generally discharge me right after that, right? But then I kept having to go back into, I guess it was a psych ward. I don't really know what it was, but it was at Navy Medical Center Balboa in San Diego. But I kept having to go back there, and they ended up doing a med board on me, and I medically discharged. And so, yeah, my Navy career was cut short, not by choice. Right. Thank you. But, yeah, not by choice. I wanted to stay in, but, you know, I just couldn't after that.
So did you report that? How was that handled?
Yeah, I did. I reported it. Matter of fact, I told a guy that I called my brother. We were extremely, extremely good friends. And after he found out, he went and confronted the guy in front of, like, everybody was at the barracks. And it got back to my chain of command. My chain of command had to do something, right? So I ended up talking to NCIS every day for, like, 3 months. Literally every day. They tried to get me to go talk to the guy at his workstation with the wire. They had me call him with the wire. I mean, it was just, like, I mean,
to get a confession.
To get a confession. He never confessed. He said everything but that, right? And so, yeah, when I went back to the States, to San Diego, we finished the trial, or the whatever you call it, via video, and he ended up getting away with it because there was alcohol involved. It happened at a party. You know, everybody was drinking, and I could only remember, like, flashes of it.
Right.
So, yeah, he got away. They was sending me, like, notices of every command that he went through. They sent it to me for years, but then all of a sudden they just stopped. So I don't know if he got out of the military or what, but.
So you would know where he was.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would know where he was. Yeah.
So did you leave that feeling like, how did you leave that feeling?
Man, I felt, like, unfulfilled. I felt, after getting that verdict, I was even more lost than I already was. Because after that incident, that particular incident changed my life. It changed who I was. It birthed something in me that I couldn't identify. I was just lost. And I felt alone. I felt disconnected from everything and everybody. I felt lost. I was hurt. I was disappointed. I was angry. I was scared. You know, I was all of those things at once.
Yeah. And you're in the system that's supposed to protect you and look out for you and battle brothers and sisters. And yeah, that's unfortunately a very common thing that we hear, especially those of us who've been in the military. We know it's common.
Yeah,
I don't think the world knows it's common.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the same things that happen in any group or situation happen in the military, if not worse to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm very sorry that happened.
Yes, sir.
What, tell me kind of, what was your faith before that? Like when you were a kid, did you kind of have spirituality, faith, Christianity? What was the thing? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were your parents Christian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I was raised by my mom.
Okay.
And we grew up in the church. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but we literally went to church every Sunday. My mom used to keep 2 jobs to take care of us. At all times, I remember her having 2 jobs. And regardless of how tired she was or what else she had to do, she made sure we was in church on Sundays and Wednesdays. Mm-hmm. And my mother's very, very strong woman. I'm so happy to have her as a mother. But
and she's still with you?
Yeah, she is.
Awesome.
She is. Yeah.
And what's her name?
Linda Clark.
Shout out to Linda Clark.
Right?
You grinded it out, Miss Linda. You grinded it out, and you raised an awesome daughter. So you should pat yourself on the back.
Oh, yeah. She definitely created that foundation to where, when I did stray away, I knew what to do. I knew who to call on. I knew how to get my breakthrough. Mm-hmm. I just kept calling on the name of Jesus, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
That's what I did. Yeah.
And so when the assault happened, how did that shake up, your faith? I mean, you went down obviously into the spiral.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing, I want our listeners to hear is, you can follow Jesus, you can love Jesus, you can, do all those kind of things. And sometimes a tragedy happens that's so violent and so painful and so awful that it shakes things up. You don't lose your faith. You don't lose your identity. You don't lose your faith, but sometimes you get lost.
Yeah. I mean, that's the good thing, because things are going to happen anyway, right? So if we are a Christian and if we have, if we have faith, then we have some help. We have some strength. We have that, that assurance that, okay, if the way that I'm feeling right now, if I'm hurt or fearful or whatever, I know that if I pray to God, like, God, this is how I'm feeling, I need your help, He will help. He will send resources. He will, send people to say that whatever it is you need to hear at that moment, He's going to send something. Mm-hmm. And so that's the great thing about having faith and about, because we're going to go through stuff anyway. That's just life. That's just, our fleshly experience. That's our experience here on earth. But to have help, that's the whole point of our faith.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good. Mm-hmm. So tell me the transition after the assault and you kind of went downhill. Is that when all the rest started happening? Okay.
Yeah. I came home to Louisiana and I didn't know what to do with myself.
So you came back to Castor?
Yeah, I came back to Castor.
Oh man, that's a big shift. Huh?
It was. Yeah, man. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what my next step was. I didn't know what direction I wanted to go in. I just didn't know, and started hanging out with some family members, and we was drinking all the time, partying all the time. And this particular night, I was hanging out with the aunt and my cousin, and we had been drinking or whatever. And then I remember going to my cousin's boyfriend's house. The house had no electricity whatsoever, right? And I was sitting in the living room still drinking on the beer or the alcohol, whatever I had left. And I remember seeing them in the kitchen, and they were doing something. I just remember seeing a lighter kept, going in the air. And I'm like, what is that? What are y'all doing? And they was like, oh, nothing. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, what y'all doing? And the way my aunt introduced me to it, it was like she was introducing me to a person. She was like, baby, this is crack cocaine. I said, well, I want to try it. I was looking for anything to cope. And so my mother, she kept us shielded, protected as a child, because I didn't really know anything about crack cocaine except what I saw on TV. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I never experienced any, addiction or whatever. The only thing I experienced was my dad, because he was an extremely bad alcoholic. Mm-hmm. He actually died from alcoholism. But, yeah. And so I was like, hey, I want to try it. Mm-hmm. And so I tried it. And I immediately fell in love. And that same night after I was coming down from that high, when I tell you the depression and anxiety kicked in out of nowhere, like, I was already depressed. I was already, anxious, right? But I felt overwhelmed. I just wanted to die. Mm-hmm. And I went and got a knife out of the kitchen. And I walked outside. I'm like, man, I'm so scared on what I'm gonna do to myself. So I called 911. I was scared. I'm like, hey, I'm scared right now. I want to hurt myself, but I don't want to hurt myself. And so the next thing, like 5 minutes later, a police car came. I was standing in the middle of the road at this point. Police car came. He got out the car. He see me with the knife. He put his hands up. I mean, he was like, hey, it's okay. It's all right. And he kind of talked me down, and I ended up going to a hospital in Arcadia, Louisiana. And it was a little small hospital. Literally everybody in my family showed up that night. Mm-hmm. And maybe a few days later, my brother came down from Little Rock, Arkansas, about a 4-hour drive from Arkansas to Castor. 4-hour drive that night at midnight to do an intervention. And him and about maybe 5 or 6 of my cousins, they got together and did an intervention. And I went to rehab for the first time in Temple, Texas, not soon after that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a wild story.
Right. Yeah, there's plenty more.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's one of the things in hearing about you and listening to your story a little bit and seeing your posts on social media, it's beautiful to see where you are now,
right,
and to hear that story. And I think that's one of the things that people, if you've never been through that type of trauma or experienced that type of pain, people are like, why would you choose that? Why would you smoke, crack? Why,
right.
Like, better, right?
Right,
if you knew
right.
Jesus, how would you choose these things? And the reality is that we're in so much pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we're just looking for anything to grasp.
Yeah.
Anything to grab onto. And so, there's people out there listening to this now that are in pain right now, currently.
Right.
That are like, man, I want to get out of this pain. And they're grabbing all kinds of stuff that they don't need to grab.
Right. Right.
We were talking about it the other day. I said, in life, there's a lot of things that feel good when you do them initially.
Yeah.
That feel horrible after.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yes.
When you smoke crack, when you do drugs, when you smoke pot, when you watch porn, when you do whatever the thing is that it's going to give you that high, that dopamine, that
just
that
for
charge
that moment.
Right. And then you crash. Mm-hmm. I can remember the first time. I'd gotten back from Afghanistan and I was in the same spot, just a lot of pain. I was going to church, I was kind of figuring out. I'd moved back to DeVille to live with my parents.
Okay, yeah.
So very small town. And that's such a hard transition from going from like
my God.
The world of like being a professional military person and being around adults and kind of having 3 hots in a cot and knowing what you're doing.
Right.
And then going back to somewhere where everybody's the same that they were when you left, or they've moved on or whatever.
Right, right.
And I remember I had a bunch of people over and we were hanging out and somebody had like hash and pot and ecstasy. And so I had never done a drug, I'd never touched anything. I was always like kind of the good church boy and I did them all that night.
Wow.
And I remember crash. I remember like trying to look at myself in the mirror in the middle of the night, like before I was going to bed, like 2 a.m. And I felt like I was like falling through the mirror. And,
dizzy, right?
I laid down the bed. I felt like I was just falling through the bed.
Yeah.
And I got done with that. And I think my mom woke me up at like 6 o'clock that morning because I lived with my parents. And she didn't know any of that was going on. And she's like, hey, your uncle's in from town. He wants to visit with you. And I think I'm still probably high. So I go over there and I remember sitting in the living room and there was like 5 or 6 family members were all just sitting at my grandparents' house talking. And I remember thinking like, I was seeing like a squirrel in the living, like, I don't know. I started talking about something and I looked up and everybody was just kind of looking at me like, what are you saying? I was like, I'm really tired. I'm going to go back home. So I went home, but the same thing happened. I spiraled from that point and I couldn't get back out of that depression. I couldn't get back out of the anxiety that hit me for the next 6 months to a year. And that sent me to therapy and kind of started this journey for me.
Right.
And if you've not experienced it, people don't understand.
Yeah, that's true.
But the good things, right? None of us really want to do those up front, but we never regret it.
Right.
Right. I've never eaten a whole pizza and then afterwards been like, oh, I'm glad I did that. Right. I've never gotten drunk and the next day been like, man, I'm super glad I got drunk.
Right.
But when sometimes I'm like, I need to be in the Word. I need to eat well. I need to exercise. And I typically don't want to do it, but afterwards I never regret it.
Right. Right.
And so it's true. It's funny when people are judgmental of people who get into drugs and alcohol and who get in, it's like, well, those things work.
Right.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
There's such an easy step into it. So I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So depression hits, anxiety hits, and kind of where did you go from there?
Well, I went to...
When you went to rehab, that's right.
I went to rehab.
Okay.
Did
that work?
It did for a while. Dude. Like, okay, so I went to the rehab. Went to it was like specifically for MST.
Okay.
Right. So I was in this women's group, and I think I got into it with one of the people that was there with me over something so small, and they was starting to kick me out of the program. Like, I cannot go back home because I know that I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to leave this structure yet. you know. And so I went to a NA meeting, Narcotics Anonymous meeting that same night. And I met this guy, this older man. And he worked for the VA. And so I talked to this female who happened to be his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, I think ex-girlfriend. And so she was like, hey, once you talk to him, he can maybe talk to the administrator there to see, you know, if they can find you another program at the very least. So you don't have to go, because it was a domiciliary type VA where they had MST programs, homeless programs, and a whole lot of different programs.
Right.
And so I talked to the guy. I was crying. And so he had talked to the administrator. I ended up staying in a different program. And me and that same guy, same older guy, he ended up being my sponsor, right? So I didn't know at the time that technically you're not supposed to have a sponsor of the opposite sex for many reasons. Yeah. Right? So I didn't know. I was like 3 or 4 months sober at that point, right? But he knew. He was like 15 years, right? So he began to be my sponsor, and I fell in love with him, right? And he basically used me and emotionally abused me and left me exactly where I was at, you know? And at 4 months sober, that was something I just couldn't take. Yeah. You know? And I'm like, how can, somebody who's supposed to be like this big, responsible guy in the Narcotics Anonymous community, come to a newcomer, sleep with her, have a relationship with her, and then, because everybody in that meeting, turned on me. Yeah. Right? So I told them, after you broke up with me, I tried to call some of the women, to talk to them about it and just to see, what kind of input they had on it. And, all of them turned on me. I'm like, why are you guys turning on me? You know what I'm saying? I didn't know. And so, yeah. So after that I relapsed.
Yeah, it's such a horrible thing to be put in a vulnerable situation of recovery and these systems and with men and women and the differences, and that's why those boundaries are there. Right. But yeah, also, you get groomed, and I'm sure it's a slow fade, and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then before you know it, and when we're not recovered and we haven't dealt with our trauma and been in therapy, there's a big difference between sobriety and recovery.
Yes, very big difference.
Yeah, and so it sounds like at that point you're just dealing with sobriety and trying not to do the drug, but haven't done a whole lot of where am I at and where did all this happen? And
I didn't do any of the work at that point.
Right, especially since you had sexual trauma already. Right. That makes you even more susceptible to wanting that connection, wanting that intimacy, wanting and intimacy not being sexual, but just not even knowing what intimacy is in general.
Yeah, like companionship.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah, and that can get twisted up. Mm-hmm. And then as we saw the last, several years of the Me Too movement, it's really easy for people to blame the female or blame the male, the victim. Right. And go, well, what'd you do?
Right. What were you wearing? Why were you there? Right.
I always think about Job in the Bible, where his friends come up and they're what's up, dude? What'd you do to deserve this? Right. And it's like nothing, and sometimes that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So I hate, another thing I hate that you went through. Yeah. Although I'm sure on this side of it, and I'm not going to speak for you, but we look back on our past and go, right. I wouldn't do it again. Right, but
I don't regret it. I thank God for the strength that came from it. Yeah. Yeah. So after.
So you relapsed and went down the rabbit trail again.
I went far down the rabbit trail. I think I stayed in Temple, Texas for 3 years after that. Literally homeless on the street, smoking dope, getting drunk, doing pills. Everything I could think of. I was just in a state of, I don't care. Mm-hmm. I don't care about me. I don't care.
Well, how could you when nobody showed you any care or compassion but your mom?
Right.
And you see people who are supposed to be safe, men and women who are supposed to be safe, turn their back on you. Yeah. Military sponsorship, this threat of no matter what I do, somebody's going to take advantage of me.
Yeah, and it must exactly be me. How I felt. Yeah, exactly.
I'm the common denominator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was already dealing with low self-esteem, right? And so
from the bullying and all that. Yeah,
I went through bullying. All that growing up, being called ugly, or you look just like your dad. And I hated that because I already felt like masculine and strong because I was always a tomboy. I was playing basketball or track and all that stuff, right? And so I hated that. I felt like, man, I'm like, dang, do I look like a man or something? Why do they keep saying I look like my dad? And so I dealt with that, with those identity issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't turn to the group of people that I thought loved me.
Yeah.
Because in the meeting, at the beginning, at the end, in the middle, they're always like, we love you until you can love yourself.
Yep.
But it wasn't like that. Because, I found out later, nobody in that room was actually practicing
what they
recovery.
were saying.
No.
Yeah.
Everybody's sleeping with everybody. You know what I mean? It was just a whole big mess.
Yeah.
Right?
And, so much of what I've seen in the clinical world is because it's a focus on behavior modification.
Right.
So, if you're going to NA or AA, it can, and this isn't for everybody, there's some great programs out there.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be that, man, I'm not drinking anymore, so I'm good.
Right.
I'm not smoking anymore, so I'm good. I'm not, binging anymore, so I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not treating the person holistically.
Right.
It's not realizing that, 82% of addictions have a comorbidity, meaning they have something else going on with it.
Yes.
Right. And especially with what you're saying and what I do, sex addiction, sexual trauma, if you're in an NA meeting, nobody's like, who's watching porn?
Right.
Or who's sleeping around. It's like you just shift that. If you're not already doing it, you just shift that coping into another issue, because really underneath all of it is an identity crisis.
Trauma. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Addiction is just a symptom. Just a symptom of the real problem.
That's right.
I know for me personally, I was the problem. My self-esteem, my confidence, my distorted view on life, on myself, And
then everybody was doubling down on that and validating that negative belief.
Yeah, absolutely. That was hard.
Yeah, and you're supposed to just pull yourself up and not do it, right?
Right.
That's how people look,
that's
just
how
make a
people
better
look at
choice.
it. Yeah.
You could have just not smoked. You could have just made, it's
Right.
like, man,
Right.
it ain't the same as going to the store and choosing between white bread and wheat bread.
Right.
It's a different kind of level of choice.
It's a whole level, like, even on the spiritual side.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's a spiritual, like, man, that's spiritual, like, this destruction. Like,
war.
When you're doing it. Yeah, it's war. And you just gotta be mindful of, what you allow, even who you allow in your life. Mm-hmm. Because the people that I had supporting me in Temple, the people that I had around me, they wasn't practicing themselves. Right. So iron sharpens irons. I ain't had no iron around me. I ain't had nobody to sharpen
wet
me.
paper towel.
Right. Yeah, bro. Like I didn't have nothing. I didn't have no backup, no help, no nothing.
Yeah.
And so,
isolation's the killer, right?
Right. It is.
We cannot do this stuff in outside of community.
Yeah.
And just because you have warm bodies, don't make it community.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So you hit that lull. You did that for 3 years. Homeless, on the street, addicted, back down in it. So what pulled you out of that?
Well, the people that I was hanging around with, that I was staying with at that time, went to jail. And so, I honestly, before they went to jail, I was honestly just tired of it anyway.
Right, because you've had to have this tendril of the Holy Spirit the whole time, constantly being like, there's something conviction. Better for you.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, every time I've been on the street, I've always been the one who, I get used a lot, or I get taken advantage of a lot, because I still had those morals. I still had those values. Like, I can't go manipulate somebody on purpose. Mm-hmm. I can't, when other people, like, you have to do those things to survive. I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah. So that's so crazy though, because like people don't understand that just having the Holy Spirit in us keeps a level of depravity that we just won't get to.
Right.
And that's what grace is, in my opinion.
Right.
It's like, and what we tend to do is give ourselves credit and go, I would never do that.
Right.
And it's like, well, the only reason you don't do it is by the power of the Holy Spirit and the grace that God's given you, not because you have some moral stance that other humans don't. Mm-hmm. So it's cool to hear, like, even in the mix of addiction, in the mix of drugs, on being on the street, all the things that are going on, there was still a fruit of the Spirit and kindness and gentleness and patience and perseverance and all these things and joy. But it was tampered down by all the trauma.
Right.
But it was still there.
Yeah, it was still there. I still, show people kindness. even if they did use it to their advantage, I did it for me, and I still had those views like I can't be this type of person. I will not be this type of person. It's not who I am.
Right.
Regardless of what I'm doing, I refuse to stoop down to that level. I still have those boundaries.
Yeah. So some people are going to say, well, how can you do that? How can you be smoking crack and doing drugs and, but then still be moral? And we call that in psychology splitting, right? It's this idea of, well, how can any of us?
Right.
It's on a spectrum, but all of us don't fully present to the world our internal struggles and sins. And I mean, we want to get to that point, hopefully, that we have community we can share and confess. But it's just on a spectrum, people haven't been through what you've been through. Right. And the more trauma and the more tragedy and the more the world chews you up and spits you out, the more there's consequences.
Right. That's true.
And so if you're out there not doing some really what we would consider outlandish behaviors, it's like, well, maybe you, by the grace of God, you haven't been through some of the things that other people have been through.
Only by the grace.
100%.
Right.
Okay. So then what took you out of that? What was where God placed things and people and what happened?
Well, I called my family. I knew that I was going to spend my checkup, right?
So you had community with these people. They got arrested, and then you were even more isolated in isolation.
Correct.
Got it.
So I called my family. The day that I got paid, I sent them money to get a rental car and come get me, and money for gas, because I knew that by the time they got there, the rest of my money would be gone. Right? I knew that about myself. So my cousin, she went and got a rental car. She came and got me, and I remember my mom staying up. It was like a 5-hour drive. My mom staying up until I got there. I'll never forget the look on my mom's face when she saw me. That was the first time she saw me in 3 years. Ooh. 3 years. I like 100 pounds lighter. You know what I mean? My face was darker, like really darker. But she looked at me and she just started crying. And then my grandmother, she looked at me and she was like, "Baby, I thought you were dead." At one point they were planning my funeral. I wasn't calling home that whole 3 years. And so they just thought I was dead. And then they were planning my funeral at one point. They told me. Yeah.
That reminds me, just of the prodigal son
prodigal
story.
Son, right? Yeah.
Your mom's she didn't come out there, right? Yeah. She didn't come try to pull you out just like he didn't.
Yeah.
But when you were home, she stayed up and waited.
She waited for me to get there. Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah.
That made me cry.
Absolutely.
That's good stuff.
Yep. She waited.
So then what happened?
Yeah. So I got home and, I kind of sat around for maybe a few days or so. And then I got into treatment. I got into SUDS at the VA.
Okay.
Yep. Went there, graduated. Let's see.
Tell it for people who don't know what SUDS.
SUDS is a substance abuse program at the VA. It's a 28-day program, rehab basically. And so I went to rehab at the VA and graduated, and then I went to I went to another one because I felt like 28 days wasn't enough, but that's all I could get into at that time. Right. It's not. Right. So, but that's all I could get into at that time. So I went to another one through was it Buckhalter and Steps downtown Shreveport? It used to be, but I don't think it's there anymore. But I went there and then met a guy, of course. He worked there, and we got together, moved in with each other, right? And then...
Right, because this filter's still not fixed, right?
Yeah. Man, I had some real... Because, the guys back then I was talking to was older guys. I had some, really, really, really bad daddy issues. And, for real. I mean, I say that, to be funny, but also in seriosity, I really did have some daddy issues.
Well, of course. You didn't have one.
Right.
Yeah, we're longing for that connection. When we don't have a father who models appropriate boundaries, respect, attachment, healthy love and affection that's not sexual.
Yeah.
How the heck are you supposed to know what to do with that?
Yep, exactly.
And we're drawn to that and we want it, but it gets so twisted up in our heart and our desire, and Satan's able to use it to, manipulate, and he's got us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. So we moved in together. I remember ended up going back to Temple for a little while because people got out of jail. I was talking to them on a regular basis, and they convinced me to come back out there. Went out there, of course, relapsed, came back, and so the apartment that me and this guy was staying in, I went out and relapsed again, just relapse after relapse, and apparently that same night he went out and relapsed too. And so when I got back home, he was there. And the first thing he did was just slap me, right? Extremely hard. And then he put his hands around my neck and he literally tried to kill me. And I don't know, it had nothing but the grace of God stopped him until I almost blacked out. How hard he was choking me. I almost blacked out, but nothing but the grace of God stopped him from, killing me that night. And I ended up getting to my phone, calling the police, and he ended up, he had a warrant for something old, and he went to jail. And so my mom, she came the next day with my uncle and his truck and his, stuff. He got all my furniture and stuff, and I moved back to Castor. And I moved in with my sister. My sister, she was a social worker. Moved in with her, and I was doing pretty good for a while, and ended up meeting another guy, right? An older guy. He was 30 years my senior. And
daddy issues again.
Yeah, daddy issues again, right? And, man, it was just toxic from the beginning. And he ended up being narcissistic. Extremely narcissistic, extremely manipulative, emotionally abusive. He gaslighted from the beginning, but of course I saw what I wanted to see. I ended up finding out that he was bisexual. Nothing against the LGBTQ community, but for me personally, I want to know give me a choice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't. If I ask you, if you like men, just say that. Be honest with me.
Right.
Give me a choice if I still want to be with you or not. Because, but anyway, I found out he was bisexual later on. But yeah, so we ended up getting married. I think maybe we were together for maybe a year before I relapsed. And so altogether we were together for 7 years. But separated for 4 of those years. And through those...
But still married.
Yeah, but still legally married. But yeah, the whole time, pretty much, I was just in and out of rehab, in and out of psych wards. It got to the point when I was in and out of jail. Domestic, everything I've ever went to jail for is directly resulted from addiction and alcoholism, right? And so... It was just a cycle. I couldn't get out of it. And not only so I'm dealing with the addiction part, and then while I'm at home, there's no peace because I'm being lied to, I'm being cheated on, I'm being manipulated, I'm being
right, which is triggering all the root things that the addiction's actually coming from.
Right. So I get home and get slingshotted, out right back out to addiction, and then from an addiction get slingshotted back home, and then just a never-ending cycle. And, that marriage taught me a lot about me. It taught me that I didn't love myself. Because there's no way that there's no way you're supposed to love somebody more than you love yourself, right? That's toxic. It's not cute. It's toxic. And it's not even realistic. It's more codependency than anything.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah,
because I think we get that twisted up, and I've talked about this on here before, but I think we get it twisted up thinking, well, especially as Christians, I understand the world being all about self-love and all this kind of things, but as Christians, sometimes we have to look at it as a sacrificial love, that God so loved the world that he gave his son, and he died for us.
Right.
But that's not, completely accurate in the sense that didn't mean Jesus didn't love himself.
Right.
Jesus was so clear about who he was to God and how much God loved him that then he was able to love others.
Yeah.
And that's different than I hate myself, so I'm just going to pour all this into you and let you do whatever you want to.
Right.
That's not what Jesus did.
Yeah.
Jesus loved himself, and it's not the type of self-love that the world is portraying to everybody right now. But it was a love that came from the Father's love to him. Right.
Does
that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Absolutely.
And so it's people need to hear, it's not, love yourself more. It's receive the love of God more. Stand in his identity for you. And then when you love other people, it'll be what's best for them and you at the same time.
Right.
And only when that happens can it be a healthy relationship.
Yes.
Because if you just care more about the other person than you do yourself, it's going to be toxic.
Yeah.
And if you care more about yourself than you do the other person, it's going to be toxic. And if nobody cares about nothing, it's going to be toxic.
Right.
The only option, right, is to look through that lens of...
Yeah, it's for God to tie that knot. God has to be the center. God has to be the orchestrator. He has to be.
That's right.
You know? And he definitely wasn't the orchestrator in this situation. I orchestrated all of that. I ain't gonna lie. I orchestrated all of that.
As we do.
Yeah. I honestly, I just wanted to be in a relationship, and I wanted to be married, because there I was 22 years old, and I'm like, all right, now's about a good time to get married, you know, because I want that
Dream.
Yeah, the dream that 50 years down the line, we're still married type of story. You know what I'm saying? Not even thinking he was already 55. You know?
You've
like
been helping him with his walker for a long
right.
time.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted. But it was, yeah, I didn't love myself. And there was a lot of things that needed healing that I didn't know that needed healing, but that relationship brought that out. You know, that abuse, that emotional abuse brought that out, because I was so blind to what was really going on, because I only saw what I wanted to see. So if it's not healthy to be, you know, that blind to reality. It's not healthy to have to feel like you have to cope in a relationship.
Right. Survival mode in relationships.
Right.
Not a great place to be.
That's not healthy. It's not cute. I used to think toxicity was cute.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like jealousy, right? People are like,
Right.
oh, he's jealous. It's like, that just means he doesn't trust you.
Right.
That's not good.
People think that's cute. Like,
Yeah,
that's
not
the
cute.
whole thing. That's so traumatic.
Yeah.
Like, it's toxic. That's
He punched this guy out because he looked at me.
right.
All that means is he does not trust you.
Right, and that he's violent.
Yeah.
He's dangerous, right? And so, man, it takes allowing God to show you what he needs you to see, and not pushing God away so that we can see what we want to see. Right? And it's like, man, okay, God, if I don't want to go through this again, right? I don't want to go through this again. So show me what I need to see. Show me what you see. Show me what I'm missing. And like all of a sudden, like, man, I got some stuff I need to work on. And so I went through CBT, through DBT. Like, I mean,
So that's when you got into therapy?
yeah,
Okay.
I got into therapy at that point. And I mean, I tried all those things, medication, I mean, all those things. And like nothing really worked. I kept relapsing, kept going back out. And literally, the first time I heard about EMDR therapy was in Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, this was in 2018 when I got tired. I got tired of everything that I was doing, and I was ready to stop. And then I went to jail, right? And so I was like, you know, I gotta get this together, man. And so went to jail, got out of jail, like, I finna get this right. Finally got into the Little Rock, Arkansas rehab at the VA, which was the same kind of as Temple. It's a domiciliary setting where they have like this whole area where veterans live, stay, work, and do treatment. And so I did that. And while I was in there, my ex-husband went to jail. He went to jail.
And y'all were still married at the time?
Yeah, we were still
Okay.
married at the time. And he went to jail for terrorism. So he had got, let me back up a little bit. So he had got this job at the VA full-time. He was working part-time at the VA. All right. And so as soon as he got the full-time job at the VA, everything had changed. Right. Because the whole time he was basically using me for my money. I was 100% service-connected veteran. So he's using me for my money. As soon as he got this full-time job, everything changed. His whole attitude changed. Everything changed.
Yeah. And so you were 100% the whole time since you got out?
I got out at 50%. 2 years later, I got 100%.
Right. So that makes sense why
Yeah.
you were able to float yourself
Yeah.
in all these ways. It's because
Right.
you had that income coming in.
Yep.
That makes sense. Got
Yeah.
it. My brain was like, okay. I was trying to put that together.
How was she doing
Yeah.
that?
How'd she get away with it?
Yeah. I got out with 50% service connection, and then maybe 2 years, if that, later, I got my 100%.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Rightly so. I'm not downplaying
Right.
that. I'm just saying
Yeah,
in my brain,
I understand.
I'm like,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And so, yeah, he got that job, and like everything changed after that. He started acting different. And then we ended up like moving from the house we were staying at because he called the police on me one day, and basically they told us we had to like leave each other alone. And so we was like, you know what? Instead of them coming by here checking on us to make sure we're not together, let's just move. So we moved into the hotel. And then when he actually started working full time, he was doing training at first, he left me. So he left me at a hotel, broke, pretty much deep in active addiction. Man, he left me to, go have his life, I guess. And so, man, after that, I was devastated because, I was codependent on him. He was my, I guess, like through all, even though like there was so much abuse and stuff, because he was there through my active addiction, it was like I was kind of protected in a way because people on the street knew that I had a husband, and he was, 6 feet tall, dark guy. He'd been in, I don't know, you know how the streets is, like you get points for this, you get points for that. And so everybody knew that. And so they would kind of have leniency.
Somewhat of a buffer.
Right.
Yeah.
Somewhat of a buffer. Yeah. And so, so he left, and I was devastated, not only for that, but because I kept hearing about him and, being bisexual and stuff like that. And then he moved in with a man. And it made me question me. It made me question myself as a woman. It made me question just who I was, period. I already had issues not loving myself. This just made it so much worse. I'm like, why was he with me in the first place? He wants to be with a man. Do I look like a man?
Right. So that brings back the childhood bullying.
That brings back the same stuff. Yeah. It's like the devil is, man, he's strategic. He really is. He's strategic. And so yeah, I've had those feelings, and yeah, I went to Little Rock. He went to jail for terrorism because that same job that he loved so much, he got fired from because he was flirting with all the women. So he was a transportation driver. How the Shreveport VA is set up, it has like different parking lots. And so there's a shuttle bus that take you from the parking lot to the hospital.
That's right.
He was the driver. He was flirting with all the women. The women didn't like it. He had too many harassment reports, right? So he got fired. He might have
drove me around.
He might have.
I've been on the buses.
So yeah, he got fired, and then 2 days later, they ran in his apartment, and he went to jail for terrorism because it's something about, he said he was gonna blow up the VA.
Oh man!
Right, if he got fired, which he did, but he was already fired before the charges came up, and so he stayed in jail for like 2 years for that, and yeah, so I went to rehab in Little Rock, came back, got in drug court so I can get that charge that I had off my record. I did really, really good. Did excellent. That's when I first started doing jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
In 2019, I first started doing jiu-jitsu. I was in Oxford House, which is a sober living house. I was doing really, really good. And
where'd you start training at?
I started training at the Louisiana Black Belt Academy on Benton Road.
Yeah. Where we go now?
Yeah, where we go now. Yeah. I started there with Coach Mike. And
okay.
Man, in fact, I started with fit boxing first. Yeah, and then Coach Mike had talked me into trying jiu-jitsu. I'm like, no, I might break something,
Fit boxing's the gateway drug.
Yeah, it is. It is. I swear. Man,
people just come in and kind of test the waters and see what's up.
I was like, man, my body don't even do that, Coach. I ain't gonna lie, my body won't do that.
That's right.
But it was so much like easier than I thought it was. But yeah, so where was I at?
So you got into jiu-jitsu 2019. You were doing the VA stuff. You started doing really well.
Yeah, I started doing really, really well. And let's see what happened.
Had you plugged back into church with this? Like, where's the Lord? Where's the Lord going in all this?
Yeah, I started going back to a church, Abounding Faith. I found Abounding Faith Temple. I started getting involved and getting back close with my bishop and stuff like that. Until I graduated.
And you had done some DBT and some CBT, and we were talking about EMDR. Yes. That's kind of where we got got back to this?
Well, I heard of MDR at that point, but the facility that I heard of it at, which was at Little Rock, they didn't think I needed it. So they pretty much tried everything.
Had they talked to you? No, I'm just kidding.
right.
I'm like, if they even talked to you, they should know you needed it.
Yeah. And so
if anybody needed
I know that now, right?
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, and I went through like the the healthy relationship classes, the anger management classes, the DBT, the CBT.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to, and you've learned this, that a lot of therapists are great, but they don't understand trauma. So they see these things as tools, but they don't understand the whole complexity of like.
Right. Yeah. And dude, so I went through that, and.
So you went through MDR?
No, not
okay.
yet.
Okay.
Yeah. I went through, let me see. What's that? Oh, yeah, drug court. I was in drug court. Which is basically veterans treatment court. It's basically you do like classes, you meet in court twice a month for like 15, 16 months, and then you graduate, and then whatever charge you had would be expunged or dismissed or whatever the case may be. So I graduated that early because I was doing like a lot of community service. I was really active in recovery community and stuff like that. And I went on a veterans retreat to Denver, Colorado. Went on a skiing trip for veterans with PTSD. By the way, if any veterans listening, you can go to your nearest vet center and you can sign up for those retreats. Just ask your counselor, whoever that may be, about the veterans retreats, and they're 100% free. Pay for everything. So, yeah, I went on that retreat to Denver, Colorado, and came back. No. On the way back at the airport, we had heard something about like this COVID pandemic going on, right? So we had finally made it back to Louisiana, made it back home, graduated, and everything started shutting down. And I'm like, man, I couldn't go to a meeting. I ain't got nothing to do. I'm like, man, let me get me a half a pint, just relax, to get some sleep. Because at that point, I wasn't on any, I was taking Seroquel, but I didn't like the way it made me feel when I woke up. So I stopped taking it. And I had really a hard time getting to sleep. So I did that. Went and got a half a pint, then went back and got a pint, then went back and got a fifth. And then about halfway through the fifth, I want some dope. I went and got some drugs. Went and got some dope, got high. The year of 2020, I went to jail once. I got hit in the head twice by people trying to take my life. I was given bad drugs by somebody trying to take my life. Ended up on life support for 2 days behind some laced drugs. Ended up homeless. I got a DUI in my truck. Lost my truck. My truck flipped 7 times, and I got out of it without a scratch. Without a scratch. And liquor bottles all over the pavement, right? So I ended up getting a DUI for that. That year, 2020, man, a lot happened. And I initially, when I first drank, and I got up that next day, and I'm like, all right, I already know the road this is gonna head down. I need to go get some help. Went to the VA. They was like, we can't help you. We can't take you. We got too many COVID patients. We can't do anything. They was like, we'll try to find you a rehab, but we can't do anything for you right now. And so,
I wish that wasn't such a common story that I've heard, but yeah,
they couldn't help. They wouldn't, right? And so, I just kept going back. I kept relapsing, of course. I mean, I kept using, but I kept trying to seek out for help, and they kept turning me down. Even one doctor, he was like extremely rude. Like, how you gonna come here drunk asking for help? I'm like,
where else am I supposed to
go?
What
else am I supposed to do? I'm asking for help. Like, I know I'm drunk. That's the problem. I want to stop. You know what I mean? And so he gave me he gave me a prescription for 3 Ativan and sent me on my way. He said this will help with the withdrawals, because I've had seizures before, withdrawal from alcohol. That's how much I drink, a lot, fifths. And I had seizures before. I'm like, how am I I don't want to detox on my own, because I feel like something will happen to me. Like, well, we got COVID patients. I don't think you're serious anyway. I'm like, okay, whether you think I'm serious or not, if a veteran reach out for help, the veteran should get that help.
Yeah.
You know? And so, yeah, I went through that. And around December, I went home for Christmas. I went to my cousin's house a few days prior so I could, get the shakes off, I guess, with the withdrawals and stuff from the alcohol. So my kids wouldn't see it. My kids were with my mom at this point. Actually, I need to kind of clear that up. But my kids, every time I would relapse and stuff like that, my mom had my kids.
Gotcha.
Right. And so, yeah, I went home for Christmas, and then just realizing what my absence was doing to my kids. That played a big part.
How old were they?
3 and 9. 3 and 8 then. Yeah. It hurt, but I wanted to get high at the same time.
Yep.
I felt so bad because my kids, like, every time I would leave, like, Mama, when you coming back? I didn't want to lie to them. I'm like, I don't know, but I'll be back, But the only thing I thought about was getting high, though. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's all I thought about. And I felt so ashamed to think like that and to feel like that. Like, how can I look at my kids, love my kids, but still want to get high at the same time? But I did. I did. That's how the disease of addiction is extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. And, and I came back to Shreveport. That's where I was getting, drunk and high at. Came back to Shreveport. I think I got high and drunk maybe a few days. And then I was like, you know what? I'm done. So I went to the hospital. I went to a civilian hospital, actually, Willis-Knighton. And I told him what I was doing. I'm like, hey, I want to go home. I want to stop drinking, but I don't want to do it in the hospital. And so he gave me Librium, a prescription for Librium. And I went to that same cousin's house in Minden, detoxed on her couch for 4 or 5 days, then went to my mother's house and called the VA, told them what I wanted. Like, hey, I need some help. I'm willing to wait. I'm sober now. I just need to get in something as soon as possible. And I got to Heroes program in Opelousas, Louisiana. That's when I was introduced to EMDR there. And the Heroes program in Opelousas was different than any other rehab I've ever been to. Like, they focused more on us and what we wanted in our healing,
Not
rather
just
than
the behavior modification.
Yeah, rather than just throwing a whole bunch of books at us. And, and that was...
Yeah, they moved it from informational to transformational.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what I needed, right? And the first time I did EMDR, it was a miracle. It was a miracle. It worked so good for me. Like, I'm still doing EMDR to this day. I still go to therapy I've been doing it for a little over a year now. And that was, it was like the missing piece. It's like the missing piece for me. And I recommend that for anybody who's ever been through any trauma. EMDR therapy. Definitely. Telling you, brother.
Yeah, that's one of the kind of first requirements here that people have to get when they come on as a therapist. Is
Yeah.
I'm like, if you can't pay for it, I'll pay for it, but you got to have this in your bag.
Oh, it's important.
Yeah.
It's important. It is miraculous. It is.
Yeah. Yeah, any of the there's kind of the big 4 or 5 trauma trainings that are out there that are extremely helpful and making sure people can get to the root causes of these things and help people shift those memories and shift the pain and look at themselves differently and rewrite that narrative. And all that stuff is, it's relatively new to the culture. There wasn't a diagnosis for PTSD until 1984.
Right.
And so it's like we're just now getting it. We think we're so advanced,
right?
But really, the last 5 to 10 years, has anybody really dealt with trauma in a way that's effective as individuals, and then integrating that into the VA or into groups or into Heroes it's a slow grind for us to, those of us who are been awakened to it. That's the same thing for me. I did EMDR in 2008, 2009.
Okay.
And that is the only reason I married. Was having those breakthroughs from my childhood trauma and sexual abuse and divorce stuff. And I would not have been married had I not. I mean, the Lord's going to do anything, but that's what He used to shake me up.
Absolutely.
So we have a very, very different, but also on the high point, similar story. It's cool.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So you do MDR. That's a breakthrough. You know, a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
And then plugged into church community.
Yeah. Plugged into church.
And so you've been sober for how long now?
19 months.
That's amazing.
19 months. Yeah. I have 2 years, January 3rd.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm super proud of you.
And it's the longest I've ever been sober. The longest. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I'm gonna put it like this: the longest I've actually been in recovery.
Yeah, that's
you
right.
know what I mean?
Sober and recovery are different things.
Right.
So you've been doing jiu-jitsu actively?
Yes, jiu-jitsu was life changing for me. Jiu-jitsu, man, it gave me a purpose when I didn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It gave me like direction when I didn't have direction, because like I started it in 2018. Like I knew I wanted to do something physical. Like I've always loved boxing. I always wanted to do that. And then, you know, of course, when I was drinking, I wanted to fight everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I wanted to learn the actual skill set, right? But I wanted the mental part and the physical part. And so I went to start doing fit boxing, and then gradually got into jiu-jitsu, and it built my confidence. You know, not only just for me as a person, but like my skill set, and it changed me. It made me want to be better, to do better. It just, man, and I don't even think Coach Mike. Well, he probably does. He knows, like, you know, what that place does. I don't think he knows what it does for me, but it gave me friendships, you know, like the people there. Like I feel like I'm at home every time I'm there. Mm-hmm. And it was good for me to have a little bit
like church.
Yeah.
You know, for those of us that are there that are trained that are Christians, I mean, right. I do feel that vibe that everybody. Yeah. It's a real weird mold of like intimacy and connection and friendship and you know, all the same purpose and all the same thing, and we love Jesus, and we're trying to we know, you know, and you know, people like us who have trauma and who use jiu-jitsu as a tool to help us cope. We know there are others out there, so there's this cool like symbiotic thing going on where it's like, I know you are, hey, this is benefiting all of us, like, and also the Lord's involved, and so it is such a crazy intimate weird, you know.
The whole mix of things, the whole combination of it. It's outstanding. It's been outstanding to me in my life. And so I did jiu-jitsu and the Emdr Therapy jiu-jitsu, and being in my word on my own, as well as, you know, in church, and being involved in church, and being a mother to my kids, you know. And I thank God, because my mother, she shielded my kids from what I was actually doing. They just knew that mommy was sick, mommy wasn't all right. You know, that's pretty much all they knew. And I can be a mother. I am a mother, a present, active, loving mother to my kids today, and I'm grateful for that. I didn't continue going to like AA or Narcotics Anonymous, but I do have a recovery meeting in my hometown, because there wasn't one, and I didn't have a vehicle when I first got sober, and so I needed to have something, so I created one. And but that's the only time I go to, like, you know, the 12-step recovery type thing. But
when did you know you wanted to write the book, and kind of how'd that play out?
Or the
memoir?
Well,
I mean, you've always wanted to since you were little.
I know what you mean. I started, it took me the whole year 2021 to write it, the whole year. And I just knew it was time. God told me it was time. And so I started writing. And every time I would start to write, I would pray. Like, God, give me the words to say. God, to help me get my point across. Help me get what I'm trying to portray across. And I would do that. And I just knew. I felt it. God told me it's time. And I was obedient. I started writing. And then, like, everything else kind of just opened up, like the editor and stuff like that. And I'm the state leader for Mission 22, which is a national nonprofit organization. We raise awareness to the 22 veterans that succumb to suicide every day. I've been with Mission 22 since 2018. the CEO of Mission 22 created my book cover. Like,
nice.
Like, that's how God opened up, like God provided everything. Like, if he tells you to do something and you are obedient, he will provide everything you need to get it done.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I knew you had the Mission 22 tat on your forearm, so I was just going to ask. I was going to lead into that in a minute. So I'm glad you led to. Yeah, I was wondering when you started that or how that got plugged in.
Yeah, 2018. I realized that. Well, I didn't even know the statistics until I went to rehab in Little Rock.
Yeah,
and so one of my fellow vets told me the statistics, and I was devastated. I'm like, for every day, 22 veterans a day. I knew I had to do something, and so I looked up, organizations that help veterans.
That's cool. So you're the state leader here.
I'm the state leader in Louisiana.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and man, I love what Mission 22 stands for. I love what we do. Because, I could have easily been one of those 22.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Definitely could have. Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm so glad that it didn't work. I'm so glad that it didn't happen. I'm so glad that death didn't have authority on either one of us.
Amen.
Right? So, yeah.
Yep. Thanks to him who overcame it.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, what would you say, what are some kind of top points that you would give to somebody if they find themselves in your same position, or if they're loving or trying to support somebody who's been in this same position, in this road to recovery, in this relapse, in this kind of just tragedy?
Right.
Well, what are some things you'd say?
Well, first and foremost, be honest with yourself. I'm pro therapy. I'm big on pro therapy. Therapy has worked for me. It's one of the main things that's working for me is therapy. But if you're not honest with yourself, then you won't be able to move forward. So that's why I'm raw with telling my story now. Like, I'll get down to the nitty gritty, tell anybody.
I love it.
All this stuff.
It's the boast in your weaknesses part, man.
Yeah.
People don't know what that means. So I value, and I just want to thank you for taking the risk of sharing on here, sharing in your memoir. It's really, people don't realize it's, people who would listen to this are going to love it. And they're going to say, man, she's so brave and she's amazing. And a lot of people are going to say, I could never do that.
Right.
But the reality is you can.
Yeah, you can.
If you can put yourself in the right, perspective with who Christ says you are and what he's done in your life, then
absolutely
you're just boasting about what he's done.
Right. Yeah, because it wasn't me, it was him.
That's right.
It was him.
And that's what I hear in your story is just that he was faithful throughout that whole thing.
Absolutely.
Even while we're being stubborn.
Right. Even in my mess, even in the midst of my trials and tribulation, he was still faithful. Even when I wasn't faithful to him. Mm-hmm. He was still protecting me, shielding me. A lot of things. I literally could have been dead living on the streets. There's shootings and killings happening all the time in Shreveport, and I was right there on these streets that it's happening.
Yeah. Even in the, I was thinking about when the cop came, and you had the knife.
Yeah.
That could have easily been a bad situation.
Could have easily been a bad situation, right? But that cop particularly, he knew because it's a small town, so he knew my family. Yeah. And everybody down there loves my grandmother. God rest her soul, but. Everybody around there knows my grandmother, loves my grandmother, and fortunately he knew my family and he knew of me because everybody knew. The girl from the they say army. The girl from the army came home. That's all they know.
Everything's the army.
Everything's
right?
the army. You say military, they automatically think army, right?
Well, unless you're in Shreveport, then you're in
the Air Force. Yeah.
That's
that girl from the army.
That girl from the army. That's hilarious.
Yeah, just like if you go anywhere in the world, and you say you're from Louisiana, New Orleans. No, there is so many more places in Louisiana.
Absolutely, the whole state's not a swamp.
Right.
People think that. Yeah. Sure. Or they do that thing when you're in the military, I got a cousin that was blah blah blah.
Right.
Listen, there's 2 million people.
Right.
I'm not gonna know.
With probably the same name.
Absolutely. But I find myself doing it too. I'll see somebody in a bomber thinking they'll be talking to me and I'm I'll at least say, I hate to ask you this because there's thousands of you, but do you know so and so? He's like, no. I'm yeah, probably not.
Just had to put it out there real quick.
At least I know it's a dumb question up front.
You had to think about it later, dang.
I was dang, I totally asked this stupid civilian question. No hating on the civilians out there. Right. I'm one now. All right, so that would be your suggestion. What for somebody maybe who is struggling in their faith or struggling to understand how somebody can be a Christian and still do all these things, kind of what would you say to that?
I would say that they need to remember that we are spiritual beings having a fleshly experience, and that sometimes we're at war with our flesh, Sometimes we're at war with our flesh, but it doesn't mean that, like, the flesh may have the battle, but the spirit has the war, right? So we have to always carry the armor of God with us to fight those things, because there's always going to be something, right?
Absolutely.
Whether we're Christian or not, there's always going to be something. But having faith, having God, having Jesus, having the Holy Spirit is so much more effective. It's so much more fulfilling, and it completes you. It makes you whole. It makes you new.
That's good.
Yeah. Fill so many holes.
Yeah, it just reminds me, I was just looking it up, but Ephesians 6:12 says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood,
right,
but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of the evil in the heavenly realms.
Right.
And that's, outside of all of this stuff, right? EMDR is great, therapy's great, CBT is great, rehab is great. Like all of those tools, all of those physical flesh and blood things we need, because we are in fleshly bodies and we need that help.
Right.
But if we forget that there's a spiritual war being waged and waged against us, that really deep down under all of it is the lie that God doesn't love you.
Right.
You've done too much to be loved.
Lies.
And that you're not secure in his care.
Right. You're right.
And underneath all of that, when we start to actually believe that we're sons and daughters of God, as Galatians says, that we're no longer slaves, but that we've been adopted as sons and daughters.
Right.
Oh, man. Change your life.
Life changing. Right. Life changing. Telling you.
But we got to believe it. We can think it and intellectually know it. We can even maybe be saved.
Right.
We could have said, okay, I see Jesus. I know who he is. I accept him. But man, that shift in believing it, and allowing the Holy Spirit to lead us and do what we can't do.
Yeah, because we can't live off of what we've been told all our life, or what our parents told us about God or about Jesus. We have to get in the Word of God ourselves. We have to gain a relationship, and the only way to gain a relationship is you got to know that person, right? You got to know who God is, and only by staying in consistent contact with God is that relationship going to develop.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, and he's in you and he's in me, and so it's also relational. That's
right.
I think that's the other reason. Things like jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or martial arts or whatever the thing is that people do, running clubs. I think jiu-jitsu is the best, but
it is.
That's right. But whatever the thing is that people throw themselves into, it's just their hearts, their imago Dei, their image of God that they're bearing, saying, hey, you need other people.
Right.
And so hopefully people can learn that it's all of that together. It's the community, it's sharing, and not only do we experience God when we read the Word and read Scripture, but we can read Scripture all day, and without the Spirit of God, without the Holy Spirit,
right? That's that conviction. The Holy Spirit is that. And
so we have to do that in community. We have to get that honesty, that radical honesty that we talk about with I was talking to Klein about that this morning before the podcast.
Yeah,
that radical honesty of, look, I'm going to bear this all because if I keep any of it, I'm going to lose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do it with the right people. Right? Do it with the safe people. Find those people God puts in your life. The gyms or the places or the things you go to that, you find the right people. And there's plenty of mess, but we can't let what humans do teach us about God.
Right. Because we're flawed. We're flawed. Some are more flawed than others, right? But it's not a reflection on, even like religious people, right? Because a lot of people have strayed away from God because of something religious people done did to them 100%. In the name of God, right? But you have to know God yourself. You have to know the will of God to know the difference. All right, God's people wouldn't really do that. Or God wouldn't lead that person to do that. You got to know the difference.
Yep,
right?
You do.
Yeah.
I would. You said something. What did you say? Some people are more flawed than others.
Yeah.
I would say I would disagree. I would say we're all equally flawed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We just have. Sometimes we have better access to the Spirit,
right?
Which then should provide more fruit.
That I agree with. I agree with.
So,
I like the way you put that.
A lot of times people have worse symptoms than others.
Yeah.
Right. They may be more addicted. They may be more violent. They may be more aggressive, whatever.
Right.
But if they're in Christ, then, you know, the sanctification process, they're saved, but their sanctification process looks different.
Yeah.
Right. What fruit they bear looks different.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that, and I just say that to people listening because either they feel more flawed or they're judgmental and look at other people as more flawed.
Oh, understood.
And I want to
I wanted to clear that up. Oh, yeah.
I know what you meant, but just for listeners.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Because it's, I think that's unfortunately, where the American church and just religion in general tends to take us, is putting us in camps.
Right.
You know,
right.
And what Jesus says is we're all in the same camp.
Yeah.
We're all sinners.
Yes, all.
But now, if we're in Christ, we stand as new creations, born again, made new, healed, restored, redeemed.
Whole. Yes.
And so that shift of salvation says, hey, look, the shift is how God sees you.
Right.
He used to see you as old and separated, and now he sees you as he sees Christ. And that doesn't change no matter how flawed we are.
Right. That's true.
Right. He's making diamonds out of dust.
Yes.
Well, any closing thoughts, comments, things you'd want people to know?
And I just want everyone to know to stay in prayer. Stay in prayer and be honest with yourself. Believe in yourself, because there's nothing impossible. There's nothing impossible for God. There's nothing impossible for you who's in Christ. And just know that you can make it out of addiction. That you do not have to be an addict for the rest of your life. Yeah. You do not have to be. God changes things, period.
Absolutely.
And I'm a living witness to it.
That's awesome. I appreciate your story. I appreciate your vulnerability.
Thank you for having me.
Tell them the name of your memoir again. In between.
Oh, yeah. Stuck between pleasure and pleasing God.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're all stuck there.
Right.
You know, but we don't have to be in the Spirit.
Absolutely.
And, you know, he can overcome those things and pull us out. And so, you know, I just pray for you that you continue down the road of sobriety and health.
Yeah.
And whatever bumps come your way, know that I'm here. You know, our community's here. We love you. You know, we get a roll into jiu-jitsu. You know, if you ever need anything, you just tell me, you know, tell somebody, reach out to somebody, the drill, but saying it, the reality is, at least this place and this church and the way we do it is we bring people in and then we're part of the body.
Right.
And so, you've given me so much to think about in my own heart and in my own life and with my own clients, and just your story is going to, on this podcast, impact so many people. Yeah. Give them hope, give them encouragement, all for the glory of God. And so you're doing it.
Yes.
Right. You're doing it.
Yeah.
So when you get in that place where you doubt yourself or you feel stuck or you feel, know that you're doing it, and I see you and God sees you and people see you and they're proud of you and see your story and see.
Amen.
Well, we appreciate you guys listening to us. And we hope you like and subscribe. Get her book. Can you get it on Amazon?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. It is. Yeah.
So y'all check that out. We'll put a link in the description. I say we, Chip will. I'm terrible at that stuff. Put a link in the description of the book. You got any other resources for them that you like them to check out? Your Instagram page, or do you have anything for them to follow?
My Facebook is Kim Clark Books. Instagram, Kimberly Clark Writes. And I have an email as well if you want to reach out. It's Kimberly Clark, 7 books@gmail.com.
Awesome. Yeah, and she's if you have somewhere you want her to come speak or talk, she's booking some speaking stuff and come and tell her testimony and share her story. And you heard a little bit of it today, but there's a lot more in the memoir and a lot more good stuff in there to listen to and hear. And
absolutely.
So be sure to grab that. And thank you guys. God bless you. We'll see you next week.